So in today's video, we're going to talk about The Shining and why it isn't in Dead by Daylight yet. We'll go over exactly what Behavior Interactive would have to do to license Jack Torrance into Dead by Daylight. The story of the Shining franchise is interesting because the author Stephen King didn't exactly like the film adaptation. Does this make the Shining licensing situation complicated? Let's find out together.
Did you like Kubrick's film of The Shining?
No. Cold. I'm not a cold guy. I mean, I think one of the things that people relate to in my books is there's a warmth, there's a reaching out and saying to the reader, I want you to be a part of this. And with Kubrick's The Shining, I felt that it was very cold. Shelley Duvall as Wendy is really one of the most misogynistic characters ever put on film. She's basically just there to scream and be stupid. And that's not the woman that I wrote about.
How's it going, everyone? My name is Schmuckles. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. I also stream on Twitch on Wednesday and Sunday nights. The link for that is in the description below. When looking online, I found many fan-made concepts showcasing Jack Torrance from The Shining as a killer in DBD. I'd imagine that Jack Torrance's power would be centered around his insanity or his incredible strength, which could instill fear into survivors and give him built-in brutal strength, or ways to combat pallets that we've never seen before in DBD. He could even say his famous quote when breaking down doorways.
Here's Johnny!
The Huntress actually has an animation of breaking down doors with her axe that looks pretty similar to what Jack's animation would look like. The Huntress also has a really cool Mori with her axe, which is probably pretty similar to what Jack Torrance's Mori would look like. The obvious choice for the survivor in this chapter would be Wendy Torrance. And there's fan-made concepts for her too, featuring 3 teachable perks. Behavior could bring in the Overlook Hotel as the new map. The map itself could be the interior of the hotel, featuring long hallways in the beautiful lobby, as well as the maze outside, which would be filled with pallets, vaults, and generators. The Shining is a 1977 horror novel by American author Stephen King. It centers on the life of Jack Torrance, a struggling writer and recovering alcoholic who accepts a position as the off-season caretaker of the historic Overlook Hotel in the Colorado Rockies. His son Danny has the supernatural ability to see the hotel's horrific past. This, combined with a winter storm, influences Jack's sanity, leaving his wife and son in incredible danger. In 1980, Stanley Kubrick adapted the Stephen King horror novel into a movie starring Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance. This film brought $47 million in box office revenue. Warner Bros. Distributed this film. Honestly, there were a lot of mixed responses to the film. Some people didn't like it, and others thought it was one of the greatest horror films of all time. In 1997, The Shining miniseries was released. It's a 3-episode horror miniseries, and it's considered to be the second adaptation of Stephen King's novel. In 2019, the second film in the Shining franchise was released, titled Dr. Sleep. It was based on Stephen King's sequel to The Shining, and it was also distributed by Warner Bros. Pictures. The film made $72 million at the box office. In 2019, it was announced that a third The Shining movie is in development at Warner Bros. As of today, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining from 1980 stands as a classic piece of horror, and I think most people want this version of The Shining in DBD. On American Film Institute's Best Movie Villains of All Time, Jack Torrance was rated 25th. Fun fact, Resident Evil 7's Jack Baker was inspired by Jack Torrance from The Shining. Jack Torrance has never been in a video game before, although there's a version of the Overlook Hotel that somebody created in the video game Rust. That's the closest thing I could find to a Shining video game. There are references to The Shining in popular culture, like in Treehouse Horror 5 and The Simpsons.
Boy, you read my thoughts. You've got the Shining.
You mean Shining.
Shh! You wanna get sued?
However, apparently parodies use copyrighted works for purposes that fair use is designed to protect. So The Simpsons were able to use these references to The Shining and Jack Torrance through fair use. I looked through the credits of the episode and they don't reference Warner Bros. Or Stephen King at all. We just had the Ringu chapter announced in Dead by Daylight. This chapter is to be the first ever licensed novel into DBD. This raises the question of which version of Jack Torrance would Behavior go after, the novel version or the movie version, and who would they need to contact. I did some licensing research and I found that a lot of creative works are adapted from other works. The film industry provides many examples of this. Movies are often adapted from short stories, books, and plays. This is made possible through a license. The filmmaker obtains permission to adapt a story from the copyright owner through the license. However, both the film and the work upon which it is based are 2 freestanding copyright works in their own right. To illustrate, Stephen King published the novel The Shining in 1970. 3 years later, Stanley Kubrick released his popular film adaptation of the book under the same title. To do so, Kubrick negotiated a license to adapt King's novel for the big screen. Both the book and the novel are protected by their own independent copyright. In addition, the copyright copyright in the original work remains separate from the copyright in the adaptation and vice versa. For example, in regards to The Shining, while the copyright in the novel will expire 70 years after Stephen King's death, the duration of the copyright in the film adaptation has got nothing to do with Stephen King at all. So if Behavior wants to license a Shining chapter into Dead by Daylight, they would have to make a choice. If they want the original version of Jack Torrance from the novel, they'd have to get the character rights through Stephen King. If they want the Stanley Kubrick version of Jack Torrance, they would need to go through Warner Bros. I feel confident that Warner Bros owns the rights to the movie adaptation. Kubrick and Warner Bros held the remake and sequel rights to the property, and they're listed as the owners online. So King and Warner Bros each own their own version of The Shining. And Stephen King really didn't like Stanley Kubrick's classic film.
And why did you not love the movie Not to Press? If you don't want to tell me, it's fine, but I'm curious.
No, the book was warm and the movie was cold. It was a Kubrick film. And don't get me wrong, I love everything else the man did. I just didn't like that one.
The Shining was Stephen King's third published novel. At this time, he was likely inexperienced with working with really big movie companies and really didn't have that much control over the project.
A little while later, I wrote a book called The Shining, and it was my third book, and I got contractual rights to write the first draft screenplay for that. And I did do that, and I found out later that Stanley Kubrick, who had got the rights through Warner Brothers, had already determined that he and a lady named Diane Johnson were going to do the screenplay for The Shining. So they basically, my screenplay went in and they said, no, this won't do, and then they went on to what they really wanted to do, which was fine. I wasn't angry or upset. You're not. After a while, you get thousands of rejection slips before you break through. You kind of get used to that, and it's just part of the game.
If Behavior were to contact Warner Bros. For the Shining license, hopefully they'd also contact Jack Nicholson for the likeness rights. This would ensure that Jack Torrance would actually look like the iconic character that everybody wants to see. Unfortunately, last week it was announced that Jack Nicholson was diagnosed with an incurable disease. There's rumors going around that he has dementia. Jack Nicholson was forced into retirement from Hollywood because of this. Jack Nicholson hasn't been seen in public in over a year, and close friends fear the legendary Hollywood actor is suffering from dementia. Physically, he is fine, but his mind is not. It is very sad to see that such a super talented actor like Jack has become like that. 84-year-old director and actor Jack Nicholson, who played The Shining and Batman, suffers from dementia. He lives in Los Angeles and is looked after by his children. So if Jack Nicholson were to pass away, it seems most likely that his children would inherit his estate. That probably means that the Jack Nicholson likeness rights would fall to them. Now, how likely is a chapter like The Shining to come into Dead by Daylight? Behavior did list The Shining as a possible license in their satisfaction survey from last year. Therefore, I think that this is definitely a license that Behavior has talked about within the company. Also, in the King's interview with Matthew Cote talked about the types of licenses that Behavior tries to go after. I think Cote's description of these licenses matches the Shining license pretty perfectly.
It doesn't matter where a license comes from, whether it's a book or a TV show or a movie or a video game. If it's a cool horror license, then it has its place in Dead by Daylight. If you're an icon or a legend of horror, or if you're just extremely cool, I mean, to a certain extent, I mean, the Crypt characters that we released as legendary skins were, I mean, Crypt is not necessarily the biggest thing out there, but it was really, it had a cult following, and it was something that we wanted to put in the game, and that's it.
The link for the entire interview is in the description below. We'll definitely post more videos if any more information comes out about The Shining and Dead by Daylight. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.